Alright, aphorism 4 from Beyond Good and Evil, a prelude to a philosophy of the future. We had just left off that we might suppose man is not the measure of things. Okay. A famous quote from ancient times, Protagoras. Okay. Aphorism 4 in Book 1 on the Prejudices of Philosophers. The falsement of a judgment is for us not necessarily an objection to a judgment. In this respect, our new language may sound strangest. Again, Nietzsche invites people to just misinterpret, I think. This is akin, the way I interpret it, to my Language 7.0 project, where you need to separate value judgments from terms. So the falseness of a judgment is for us not necessarily an objection to a judgment. In other words, as a skeptic, I understand this because we might not know the truthness or falseness. There are other ways, like on its ramifications. Like, I don't know, white lies or telling your kids Santa Claus, right? But it's just about language. Okay, so yes, this makes the language our new language. We, whose task is wakefulness itself. The question is to what extent it is life-promoting, life-preserving, species-preserving, perhaps even species-cultivating. And we are fundamentally inclined to claim that the falsest judgments, which include the synthetic judgment a priori, are the most indispensable for us, that without accepting the fictions of logic, without measuring reality against the purely invented world of the unconditional and self-identical, without a constant falsification of the world by means of numbers, man could not live. That renouncing false judgments would mean renouncing life and a denial of life. Ah, you didn't know he's going to go there, huh? Thought he's like, ooh, the white lies and just promoting this and that, and he's Machiavellian. No. He's applying this idea to our logical truths, these ones we're always told we have to assume. That doesn't necessarily make them true. To recognize untruth as a condition of life, that certainly means resisting accustomed value feelings in a dangerous way, and a philosophy that risks this would by that token alone place itself beyond good and evil. Right? So that's what beyond good and evil means. A value system using criteria besides truth value. And the reason we need to do this from a skeptical point of view, not a Nietzschean one necessarily, is because of all the problems calculating truth values. Alright, aphorism 5. I think we have time to go on another one. What provokes one to look at all philosophers half suspiciously, half mockingly, is not that one discovers again and again how innocent they are, how often and how easily they make mistakes and go astray, in short, their childishness and childlikeness, but that they are not honest enough in their work, although they all make a lot of virtuous noise when the problem of truthfulness is touched even remotely. They all pose as if they had discovered and reached their real opinions through the self-development of a cold, pure, divinely unconcerned dialectic, as opposed to the mystics of every rank who are more honest and doltish and talk of quote-unquote inspiration. Well, at bottom it is an assumption, a hunch, indeed a kind of inspiration, most often a desire of the heart that has been filtered and made abstract, that they defend with reasons they have sought after the fact. They are all advocates who resent that name, and for the most part, even wily spokesmen for their prejudices, which they baptize quote-unquote truths, and very far from having the courage of the conscience that admits precisely this to itself. Very far from having the good taste of the courage, which also lets this be known, whether to warn an enemy or friend, or from exuberance to mock itself. The equally, in other words, it might be doltish of the mystic to say, oh, I know it because I was inspired, but at least it's honest. The equally stiff and decorous tartuffery of the old Kant, as he lures us on the dialectical bypaths that lead to his quote-unquote categorical imperative, really lead astray and seduce. The spectacle makes us smile, we whose wakefulness is our only task, as we are fastidious and find it quite amusing to watch closely the subtle tricks of old moralists and preachers of morals. Or consider the hocus-pocus of mathematical form with which Spinoza clad his philosophy, really the love of his wisdom, to render that word fairly and squarely, in Mail and Mask, to strike terror at the very outset into the heart of any assailant who should dare to glance at that invincible maiden in Pallas Athena. How much personal timidity and vulnerability this masquerade of a sick hermit betrays. So a little comment there on Spinoza. I kind of like Spinoza. But so does Nietzsche, in the sense that he sees him as relevant. He mentions him regularly. So this is like, in my discussions with Heiselede, this is the point. I believe it's a matter of bravery and honesty to admit that we are starting from assumptions because they work well. For the law of cause and effect, the law of non-contradiction, the rules of induction. I'm willing to say, you know what, I like that, I'm going to use it. It's no different than, hey, you know what, I like this potato, I find it edible and enjoyable, so I'm going to eat it. Alright, because somebody else could say, well, I'm just going to choose the fact that my race is superior. Okay, I think we could compare those. I don't feel that I am at a disadvantage. Especially since, it is possible to keep working back with reason so that you get more and more, you get abstractions that they're either more or less palatable. Their palatability becomes more clear. Alright. We'll do 6. I should start another cigarette, huh? Wait for the Harley to park. When I was younger, Harley people were younger. Now they're all old. Okay. Aphorism 6 of Beyond Good and Evil. Gradually, it has become clear to me, I have this underlined from 25 years ago, this first, it's not even the whole sentence, up to the semicolon. Gradually, it has become clear to me what every great philosophy so far has been, namely the personal confession of its author in a kind of involuntary and unconscious memoir. Also that the moral or immoral intentions in every philosophy constitutes the real germ of life from which the whole plant had grown. In other words, not its truthfulness, but its intentions. Indeed, if one would explain how the abstrusest metaphysical claims of a philosopher really came about, it is always well and wise to ask first, at what morality does he aim? Accordingly, I do not believe that a quote-unquote drive to knowledge is the father of philosophy, but rather that another drive has, here as elsewhere, employed understanding and misunderstanding as a mere instrument. But anyone who considers the basic drives of man to see what extent they may have been at play, just here as inspiring spirits or demons and kobolds, will find that all of them have done philosophy at some time, and that every single one of them would like only too well to represent just itself as the ultimate purpose of existence and the legitimate master of all the other drives. In other words, Nietzsche sees the mind as a community, a society of drives. They can be in an arbitrary amount of conflict, just like in a society. And he's saying each one of these drives does philosophy, and each one wants to pretend it's the only thing around. For every drive wants to be master, and it attempts to philosophize in that spirit. So, philosophy is human drives trying to overpower other human drives. Again, this is why I choose skepticism, because it values all philosophies. right? And its own philosophy is like a spectrum of all the other philosophies that the skeptic is familiar with. And thus, we don't have to inhibit a whole class of drives just because we enjoy a particular philosophy, because we can also enjoy the philosophies of those other drives. And only when there's a drive that we want to starve, like violence, a drive to be violent, that we do so by discounting and disrespecting its the philosophy of that drive. To be sure, among scholars who are really scientific men, things may be different, better if you like, but there you may find something like a drive for knowledge, some small independent clockwork that once well wound works on vigorously without any essential participation from all the other drives of the scholar. The real interests of the scholar, therefore, lie usually somewhere else, say in his family or making money or in politics. Indeed, it is almost a matter of total indifference whether his little machine is placed on at this or that spot in science, and whether the promising young worker turns himself into a good philologist, or an expert on fungi, or a chemist. It does not characterize him that he becomes this or that. In the philosopher, conversely, there is nothing whatever that is impersonal, and above all, his morality bears decided and decisive witness to who he is, and that is, in what order of rank the innermost drives of his nature stand in relationship to each other. So this is how I try to judge people, is by the principles implicit here, right? What is your rank of priorities, of a morality, of how you're going to behave in the real world, which involves interactions with others, and even if you're alone, your actions impact others. This decision of who you are, that's more important than which truths you advocate at the moment. Seven. Aphorism 7. I lied. I'm going to put 2 more aphorisms in. How malicious philosophers can be. I know of nothing more venomous than the joke Epicurus permitted himself against Plato and the Platonists. He called them Dionysiolakes. That means literally, and this is in the foreground meaning, flatterers of Dionysus. In other words, tyrants' baggage and lickspittles. But in addition to this, he also wants to say they're all actors. There's nothing genuine about them. For Dionysiolakes was a popular name for an actor. And the latter is really the malice that Epicurus aimed at Plato. He was peeved by the grandiose manner, the mise en scene at which Plato and his disciples were so expert, at which Epicurus was not an expert. He, that old schoolmaster from Samos, who sat hidden away in his little garden at Athens and wrote 300 books, who knows, perhaps from rage and ambition against Plato. It took 100 years until Greece found out who this garden god Epicurus had been. And did they find out? I love Epicurus. Okay, aphorism 8. There is a point in every philosophy when the philosopher's conviction appears on the stage, or to use the language of an ancient mystery, adventavit asinus pulcher et fortissimus. Arrived is the ass, beautiful and most brave. But Kaufman translates it as the ass arrived, beautiful and most brave. Okay, that puts us at aphorism 9. All right, aphorism 9, beyond good and evil. A prelude to a philosophy of the future. Quote-unquote, according to nature you want to live? Oh, you noble Stoics, what deceptive words these are. Imagine a being like nature, wasteful beyond measure, indifferent beyond measure, without purpose and consideration, without mercy and justice, fertile and desolate and uncertain at the same time. Imagine indifference itself as a power. How could you live according to this indifference? living, is it not precisely wanting to be other than its nature? Is not living estimating, preferring, being unjust, being limited, wanting to be different? And suppose your imperative, live according to nature, meant at bottom as much as live according to life. How could you not do that? Why make a principle of what you yourself are and must be? In truth, the matter is altogether different. While you pretend rapturously to read the canon of your law and nature, you want something opposite, you strange actors and self-deceivers. Your pride wants to impose your morality, your ideal, on nature, even on nature, and incorporate them in her. You demand that she should be nature according to the Stoa, and you would like all existence to exist only after your own image, as an immense eternal glorification and generalization of Stoicism. For all your love of truth, you have forced yourself so long, so persistently, so rigidly hypnotically to see nature the wrong way, namely stoically, that you are no longer able to see her differently. And some abysmal arrogance finally still inspires you with the insane hope that because you know how to tyrannize yourself, because Stoicism is self-tyranny, nature too lets herself be tyrannized. Is not the Stoic a piece of nature? But this is an ancient internal story. What formerly happened with the Stoics still happens today too, as soon as any philosophy begins to believe in itself. It always creates the world in its own image. It cannot do otherwise. Philosophy is this tyrannical drive itself, the most spiritual will to power, to the creation of the world, to the causa prima. So, yeah, the use of the Stoics, he does a lot of this with Epicurus, the Stoics, Pythagoras. I forget him mentioning the Cynics, but he must. Uh, they're metaphors. People still believe these same kind of ways that were first sort of illuminated back then, and in Stoicism especially. There's a lot of Stoicism in religions, in Luddite-type religions. All right, aphorism 10. The eagerness and subtlety, I might even say shrewdness, with which the problem of the real and apparent world is today attacked all over Europe makes one think and wonder. And anyone who hears nothing in the background except a will to truth certainly doesn't have the best of ears. Okay. Again, he's not attacking truth, he's attacking the assumptions about it. In rare and isolated instances, it may really be the case that such a will to truth, some extravagant and adventurous courage, a metaphysician's ambition to hold a hopeless position, may participate and ultimately prefer even a handful of certainty to a whole carload of beautiful possibilities. There may actually be puritanical fanatics of conscience who prefer even a certain nothing to an uncertain something to lie down on and die. But this is nihilism and the sign of a despairing, mortally weary soul, however courageous the gestures of such a virtue may look. It seems, however, to be otherwise with stronger and livelier thinkers who are still eager for life. When they side against appearance and speak of perspective with the new arrogance, when they rank the credibility of their own bodies about as low as the credibility of the visual evidence that the earth stands still, and thus apparently in good humor let their securest possession go, for in what does one at present believe more firmly than in one's body? Who knows if they are not trying at bottom to win back something that was formerly even a secure possession, something of the ancient domain of the faith of former times, perhaps the immortal soul, perhaps the old God, in short, ideas by which one could live better, that is to say, more vigorously and cheerfully than by modern ideas. See, if we're trying to get rid of suffering, or maximize happiness, or some mixture of the two, or anything akin to that, well, that's your reason people believe in these things. They think it's going to make them more moral, and they want to be moral. They think it's going to make them more whatever. You get into petty things like, well, I just want to be more rich. Okay, he'll do that too. Well, yeah, but not everybody is on those paths. Some people are, just trying to live better. There is a mistrust of these modern ideas in this attitude, a disbelief in all that has been constructed yesterday and today. There is perhaps some slight admixture of satiety and scorn. Okay, slow down. Unable to endure any longer the bric-a-brac of concepts of the most diverse origin, which is which is the form in which so-called positivism offers itself on the market today. A disgust of the more fastidious taste at the village fair motleyiness and patchiness of all these reality philosophasters in whom there is nothing new or genuine except this motleyiness. In this, it seems to me, we should agree with these skeptical anti-realists and knowledge microscopists of today. Their instinct, which repels them from modern reality, is unrefuted. What do their retrograde bypaths concern us? The main thing about them is not that they wish to go back, but that they wish to get away. A little more strength, flight, courage, and artistic power, and they would want to rise, not return.